Welcome to the Confessions of a Group X Instructor podcast. For group exercise junkies and enthusiastic classgoers, we'll explore and uncover authentic, thought-provoking, and heartwarming industry education and inspiration from entertaining, badass fitness pros. And now your host, creator of Warrior Rhythm, Warrior Strength, Warrior Combat, Warrior Revolution, and Warrior Kids Group fitness brands, Ellen DeWord. Here we grow.
Welcome, everybody, to Confessions of a Group X Instructor podcast. Today, I have a good friend and I feel like this is someone I lead in some ways a parallel life with. This is Chelsea Duke. She is the owner of Glow Yoga, and I can't wait to get into her story. But this episode is inspired by some questions from the audience. Some of our listeners have asked, how do you know when it's time to open your own studio? So I thought, who better to go to than a friend of mine who is very successful in this endeavor and who has an incredible local business. So this is Chelsea. Chelsea is the owner of Glow Yoga and a sports-specific mobility and mindfulness instructor for the University of Oregon Athletic Department. A Eugene native, she opened her studio 13 years ago after moving back to town and seeing the need for a strength-based yoga in a beautiful, clean, and inspiring space. She is a Lululemon Legacy Ambassador, a wife, a mother of 5 kids, which is astonishing, by the way, has a passion for wellness, healthy cooking, travel, and home renovation. Chelsea, thank you so much for being here.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. I am so excited to chat about this topic and to have an excuse to get to chat with you in general about anything. So
same. I'm like smiling ear to ear. I have like cheesy grin on my face because I get to hang out with you. I'm like, we never have time to actually hang out, so this feels like a date.
Exactly. It's going to be so good.
And if you're listening and not watching the podcast, I just want to create a visual for everybody who's listening on audio only, that Chelsea and I just happen to show up like twinning with our we clearly have both worked out. We're both like chugging water and like put our hair back in low buns. Like we have the same,
the drowned rat group exercise instructor life.
Oh, we do, like
just sweaty always. Yeah.
I was texting her because we were trying to figure out the time because she's got to go pick up her daughter Charlotte, and we're texting and I'm like, I can hop on now, which was a little earlier, and she's like, I was gonna shower, but
let's keep it authentic.
Yeah, let's be real. So I just was gonna editorialize after reading your bio that I have been in this area for, oh my gosh, I don't know, a lot of years, 20s. I don't know how many years, 20. And Chelsea's, like, I was having a hard time figuring out, like, how and when did I meet you? And like, because I knew of you way before I met you. Like, she's just one of those people that is such a leader in this community in fitness that I feel like everyone knows who you are. I feel like everyone knows who you are. Like everyone who lives in Eugene knows Chelsea. So I think I was just one of everybody else in Eugene who knew who you were. And
well, we had a family connection too. My stepmom, Jen, worked out with you.
Oh my gosh. But
I know we met way before our ambassador days because of her.
That's what I was trying to remember. I don't think so. Are you sure?
Well, time is not like real in my mind, so I'm actually not a good person to ask that. But
same. But
I know we met because of her or connected because of her at some point. Maybe it was after we'd already.
I think we had already connected through Lululemon. I think we figured out that piece later, and I was
actually, that sounds more
like I knew her. I loved her, and she would come to my cycle classes and complain the whole time about try to leave early and stuff like that. Flirt with my husband a little bit.
Yeah.
But anyway, okay.
I think, right, it's been, years. And I mean, we, like you said at the beginning, I do think we kind of like are in each other's orbit and have so many like 1 degree of separation, wellness, fitness connections, but we both are so plugged in within like our community that it's like we're just busy and kind of chugging along. But I do think it has been a little bit of like parallel path.
Yeah, like I know we do very distinctly different things in fitness here in Eugene and in the world, but I feel like a deep sense of affinity with you when I see you. Like I resonate with you when I see your work ethic, and I'll like watch your stories on Instagram, and I feel like, even though again it's different, what we do is very different, I feel like that's someone in the universe that knows me, like that knows my lifestyle, that gets my life. Like even though we never hang out, and we're like hanging out right now, this feels like a hangout. I feel like you get it. You get it. You get the hustle. When I think of you, I think of someone with like incredible personal integrity and work ethic. And because we're both like female, entrepreneurial, powerful, strong women in Eugene, I also want to say something that I love about my relationship with you is that there's like not a bone, like an ounce of competition at all. Like that just doesn't even exist. Like I love that you're killing it, and I feel your support for me, and it's just beautiful. So our lives really definitely, Chelsea and I definitely remember meeting real when we were both invited to be lululemon ambassadors in Eugene, which was kind of special because we were the first ones ever.
We were the inaugural first ones for Eugene. Yeah, which was a huge deal. Yeah. And to your point, just to go back to what you just said about, integrity and work ethic, like I think we both, one of the reasons that we connect so well and feel like we're so similar, even though like our specific fitness journeys are different, is we are driven by like promoting wellness within this community and promoting feeling really good and strong in your body. And I know everything I'm driven to accomplish and achieve and put out is based off of that. And I know it's the same for you. So it is really fun to find someone else who's like-minded, because I think sometimes in this industry, it's one thing to be really connected to the workout component, but to also have an entrepreneurial spirit and want to be able to spread this far and wide and in innovative ways it's rare, I think, to have both of those elements within you. So I think that's one of the reasons that we both love each other so much. And it was an instant connection.
Yeah. We're on the same team, trying to change lives, know, in our different and respective approaches. So let's see. Are you going to, because if you're not going to talk about what you're doing with the mobility with the athletes, are you going to get into that at all? Because if not, I touched on it in your bio, and I am curious about that.
So I think I should get into it when we talk about avenues or paths of expanding your career, because that is not, I mean, that's something that I do that I think of as a business, but it's not a brick and mortar studio. So I would love to kind of give it as an example of like, if maybe opening like a brick and mortar place is not the feeling quite right, but you're wanting a business, like there are other avenues of creating a business that you own that's maybe not an actual studio with 4 walls. So we could talk about that, because that's been an interesting journey over the last decade too. So I'm happy to hear more about that.
Okay, I love that tie-in. Let's not forget about it. Don't forget about that. Okay. So two questions at once. Do you want to introduce yourself anything about you, or do you just want to dive into my first question for you, which is, how did you even, like, I don't know the answers to any of these questions today, which is so exciting. Like, how did you even get into fitness, group fitness? How did you get into yoga?
Yeah, no, let's dive right in. I mean, I feel like they have a good overview, and so many of your questions, like I said, are really kind of give the answers of who I am. So kudos to the questions that you're asking. Also, everyone should know, Ellen was like, don't tell me the answers. Don't say it. Don't say it. Because she wants to be surprised, which I thought was so cute.
do. I don't want to have like a rehearsed conversation. Like
No,
I want to get to know you like alongside of our audience.
I
And
love it. Yes.
I love the authentic, raw. I want this to be raw. So
Yeah.
I like really don't know how you got into fitness.
Yeah. So it kind of starts as like a kid. So I'm from Eugene. I grew up here, and my parents were kind of classic, for those of you who are familiar with the area, like South Eugene, like a little hippie-ish people. And so even in the like early 90s, when I was a young kid, like elementary age kid, my parents had me going to a yoga class, which was like not cool, not mainstream, not like the standard at all. But I went to a yoga class, and that was kind of my first introduction to it. My dad is like a lifelong marathon runner. So fitness was always like really prioritized in our house. My brother played really competitive soccer. Like we were definitely like a fit, exercise focused family. So I kind of dabbled in yoga. I also ran track and cross country, and ultimately ended up running longer distances too as I got into my 20s. But running was kind of my predominant form. And then I would go lift weights and kind of mess around in the gym, but didn't have a lot of direction. But I always was really interested in moving my body. It kind of felt like a non-negotiable for me. Also, I credit my parents to that, like being raised with just being around it so much. It was sort of like, of course, I'm going to move my body and exercise every day. Like that's what we do. And it just was sort of a natural progression. I fell in love with yoga specifically when I was in my very early 20s. And I think I had tried different types of practice and didn't really like, there's such a spectrum of this practice called yoga. So I had tried classes that like didn't really resonate. Like they were fine, and I did them and I stretched and stuff, but it wasn't like, wow, I love this, until I found vinyasa flow yoga, which is a strength-based breath movement connection. And I did it, and I was like, wow, what is this? Like, I felt like my body is meant to do this. My brain is meant to be part of this. It was like this super transformative experience. And I, at the time, was living in Bend, Oregon. So
Oh, okay.
I had done yoga in Eugene. There wasn't really a lot here, but again, that wasn't really on my radar. It was sort of like I would do it every once in a while. And in Bend, there are lots of different studios. So I fell in love with it. I practiced daily, sometimes twice daily. Like I could not get enough. And I found that's like, I can only explain it as like I had a craving for more, to understand more, to do more, to have this be a bigger part of my life than just an hour a day at my studio or at the athletic club that I worked out at. So that's when I started exploring teaching or going through a teacher training. And I did
How old were you then? Were you still in your 20-ish? You
Oh
were
yeah, I was like, well, so I had my first set of kids really early. So I had my son.
P.S. Time out. Time out. Time
Yeah.
out. If you need a visual, people, Chelsea's gorgeous, and like no one would believe that she has 5 kids, period. So, and
Well, what's
and
really funny is I'm tiny, and my oldest, who's 17, is 6'5" and 200 pounds. Like he's a massive giant, and I'm a foot shorter and almost 100 pounds less.
oh
So
my
that's a trip in itself, which you have older kids. It's wild. So yeah, so I had
I'm the tiniest person in my family too.
yeah.
Wait, and also a little bit of context. So Eugene, Oregon, where Chelsea and I live, is like a valley. It's in a valley in Oregon, and it rains all the time here. Very like Seattle-ish kind of a climate because of this valley between the Cascade Mountain Range and the ocean and stuff like that. And Bend I actually lived in Bend. I don't know if you know that. My first 2 kids were born there.
Know that.
It's a high desert, and it is like probably the coolest city in the United States. Like but Bend, Oregon is amazing. And I'm just giving some visual to your story here.
And it's about 2.5 or 3 hours away, depending on the time of year.
Yes. And
from Eugene.
Both cities are there's so much athleticism here. There's so much outdoorsiness in this. It's just part of the culture here. I grew up in the Midwest. Like in the Midwest, like sitting and spectating and watching sports is the culture. But out here, the culture is being fit, being active, eating healthy, hugging trees, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I will give, when we get into the studio opening component, I'm skipping ahead, but again, let's remember to talk about this. The comparison of the community in Bend versus Eugene was a huge factor in why I chose to open a studio. So, but back to Bend.
Okay, go back
There's
to Bend.
there's tons of studios there, tons of places to practice yoga. I was in heaven. And so I did several trainings. I traveled to do one. I did one within a studio in Bend. I did my main 200-hour training at another studio in Bend. And then I started teaching. So I was probably like 22, 23, because I had my second child, Avery, in Bend also, but I'd already been teaching. So yeah, early 20s. And that was like, I loved it so much. I immediately started teaching. I think I started teaching like 5 or 6 classes a week, right when I got my 200-hour training. So I was teaching at an athletic what's it called?
Athletic Club of Bend.
I just said, yeah, Athletic Club of Bend. Exactly. Yeah. I was teaching there, and then I was teaching at a couple different yoga studios and on Sublists, and I just immersed myself in it as much as I possibly could. And at that point, I had really young kids. I was like, newly had just had a baby. So it was a really great chance for me to just kind of do something that was for me, that gave me a chance to kind of get out of that realm of just being a mom and being able to connect with people on a deeper level. And it was really awesome. And then we ended up moving back to Eugene, and I came back assuming I would just teach kind of in the same realm of like just casually, teaching at people's studios. And I hadn't lived here for a while, and I also wasn't as into yoga when I lived here as I was when I came back. And so I wasn't really aware of the studio scene. And the reality is like, there wasn't really a studio scene. There were a couple of the studios that like I went to as a kid, like the South Eugene kind of, more mellow teaching in Sanskrit, burning incense studios that I love, because that's like, those are my people.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting to have the perspective of teaching in Bend, being a practitioner in Bend, that is a smaller city than Eugene, but had such a broader and greater offering in that specific realm.
So is this when the seed was first planted, when you're moving back? Is this when you're first thinking, something's
So I was kind of went around to a few different studios to, just check it out and go take a class and see like maybe where I would want to apply. And I was like, none of these really resonate with me. Like, this isn't the style that I'm passionate about. The spaces didn't feel inspiring to me in a way that I had experienced in Bend. And I just was like, I don't know. None of this is really like, this isn't it for me.
Yeah.
And I have to credit my first husband, actually, because he is also very entrepreneurial, and he was like, open your own studio. I was like, what? And I think part of it was there was some naivety. Like, I just was like, yeah, no big deal. But I also had him as like a backbone. Like, he's like, you can do this. And I will also say, at this time, like, we were in the process of getting divorced too.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That
So
is
we kind of
shocking. So he's helping you.
Yeah.
So whoa. So it was clearly it was amicable. It was
yeah. And we moved back kind of to be around our family and to have the support system. And I think for him, the appeal of like, yeah, you'd have like an actual business versus like teaching a few classes a week was probably part of it. But he was like, you can do this. It's not like, you know what you're doing. This is something that you can do. So I really feel grateful that like that confidence got instilled in me, because I did not have a business background at all. My original career was in healthcare and had nothing to do with running a business, nothing to do with yoga at all. So I honestly, I'm grateful that I was young when I did it and that I didn't really know what I was getting into, because I'm not sure that I would do it if I knew.
Wait, can I interject a second
Yeah.
too? I just want to say, because you talked about it, you had in your bio, you say like a strength-based yoga in a beautiful, clean, and inspiring space. You put that in your bio and you just kind of touched on it again. And I just want to say for the people listening right now, if you haven't already, while you're listening, like swipe away, keep listening, and look at Glow Yoga Eugene. Is it Glow Yoga Eugene? Is that the exact handle?
Yes.
And it is seriously a stunning, it's clean, and I think it's so interesting that us the physical space is part of your like part of what you're going for, because I do think, not to sound woo-woo-y, because I'm actually not that woo-woo-y, but I do think spaces have like an energy and bring about feelings and cultivate like and it is such a clean, beautiful, kind of Spartan, elegant, classy, modern. I mean, I don't know if these words are what you were going for, but it's just, it is totally stand out
Yes.
in our town as a space. And it does create a feeling when you walk in of just pristine beauty. Like I'm gonna get an amazing yoga class because look at this space.
Well, and I think you are right. The space you're in does absolutely inspire your energy. And that the spaces we've designed, and I've designed 4 studios over the years, because and we can talk about the progression of the business, but we've moved and then we just opened a second location. So now we have 2. But the space is always really intentional, because it's like, how can we remove as much of the stress and challenge of our students' day, schedule, thought process, like what's distracting them, what's feeling like overstimulating to them? How can we provide an environment that lets all of that melt away? And just by walking in the door, by feeling the space and seeing the space, they can be inspired to feel present and intentional and calm and grounded and inspired. Like, it very much, I believe, matters the space that you're in as you practice. I think it makes a difference. And I believe that within my houses also. I mean, I'm really passionate about that, because I do think it just opens up the channel for you to be able to drop in to the parts of the practice that matter in such a better way, when that's an inspiration, and the block of, things that can be a distraction or that can feel like overstimulating, when that's removed too. So yeah, there's always been a lot of purpose.
Speaking of the design and your home, and also in your bio, you talk about like you love renovating things. And I've seen on your personal Instagram, I've seen like bathroom renovations and space. It's so cool. So are you the like designer and eye behind the space, or do you outsource that, or is it all?
I do it all. And I think it's been a progression. So I don't know if we've said this yet or not, but I opened the first studio in 2011. So it's been 13 years that I've had the studio. And I definitely have evolved and grown a lot from then to now. Obviously, I was like in my 20s when I opened the studio, and I'm now about to turn 40. And I just think, I've learned a lot along the way, and even my like design sense has evolved and shifted and grown throughout the different, phases of being in different locations and just progressing as a person. And so I do all of it myself.
Okay, so you decided that you were going to open your own space, basically because there wasn't you wanted to practice in a space, like there was a need. And so you already said like, maybe if I would have known what I was getting into, maybe I would have pumped the brakes. So you didn't totally know. So I do have a question about that. Like, how much of this staircase did how much of the process did you know and could you see before you decided to take a leap? And was it terrifying, or were you confident and young and naive, or like what was it like? How did you feel?
So I don't remember feeling fear. I felt such a strong conviction that there was a need for this type of practice in this community. And I felt like there was a demographic of people who were maybe turned off by the style, the type of practice, the location, the environment of the studios that were here, which, like I said, I really resonate with those places because they are like the first place that I started practicing. So I can do yoga anywhere and drop in, but I know that a lot of people need this practice, but that's a barrier for them. And they'll never go. They'll never try it. They'll never be interested or be able to understand what it can offer for their life if they don't have this package that feels more comfortable for them, more relatable for them, and more inspiring for them. So
I do think like the incense burning Sanskrit traditional, and that absolutely has its place, but I do think it can be intimidating. And you can feel like if you've never done yoga before, to walk into a space like that would be a big leap.
Yeah, totally. And there are so many elements of the practice that, like the foundations, the traditions, the mindfulness component, the actual asana, the way you're moving your body. Like, I believe it's all been westernized. If it's here and it's happening in this time, this era of the world, it's westernized. But again, I think making it feel more accessible to me feels like something really important. So I remember being really driven by that. And I think I also I had the example of Bend, of this community. Like, I knew without having any experience with marketing or understanding like finding your niche or any of those things that now are like so obvious to me and a huge component of how I run my business. I remember being like, there's a type of person here in this community that needs this practice, that needs it to look and feel a different way to be able to go. And it needs to be in a different location. So the other thing that I noticed was, I'm from South Eugene. My husband is from South Eugene. Like, that's my Eugene. But moving back, I was like, why are all the yoga studios within like a mile of each other? They're all like kind of downtown in South Eugene. So also looking at like the demographic of where people are living, where this kind of more active, younger, maybe mom or dad, where are they? And they were on the other side of town that had zero, nothing, no studios, like a couple big box gyms, kind of. Maybe there was one actually, I think. But no fitness studios of any kind and no yoga at all. So I was like, it seems like that's where we should have something, where there's this huge demographic of people that are needing this practice. We want to make it convenient and show them that this can be something that they can incorporate into their lifestyle. So there's been a lot of evolution over the years, but that initial, like the branding of the studio was almost like, this is a yoga studio for like non-yogis. Yeah. And that was done intentionally because I really wanted to get this practice in to these people's lives.
Did you ever get it, or do you ever get any pushback or blowback or from the traditional yoga space about, like your approach, and do you care? Or
honestly, I don't really care, but yeah. I do think, again, like looking at what's offered here, there is more of that other places, like that's being offered. So I think like we definitely have practitioners that come to the studio that want a more strength-based vinyasa class that are like more traditional yogis, and they enjoy, what we're offering. But I'm sure people have come throughout the years and have been like, I want this in Sanskrit. I want to chant Om at the end. And that's beautiful. Like, that's the cool thing about this practice. There are so many different variations and avenues and ways that you can take it. And even within our studio, like we teach really restorative classes. We teach mindfulness and meditation classes. We teach super strength-based classes that have weights in them. Like that's progressed a lot. Our offerings have changed and like expanded a ton throughout the 13 years we've been in business, but it's like, there's something for everyone. And I believe this about life. Like the way I'm choosing to live my life is not right for everyone. Like I definitely have things that I do and choices that I make that someone else would be like, no way, and vice versa. And I don't believe in judgment or, being dogmatic or having like a specific agenda. Like it's not a one size fits all thing. Just like life isn't a one size fits all thing, just like the way you eat, you feel yourself, like all of that. It's about being intuitive and figuring out who you are as a person and what resonates with you.
Yeah.
And the really cool thing is over like very quickly. So we opened with this, like, it's a strength-based yoga. And then we had like a yoga for athletes, which was kind of part of the background that I had in Bend. And then something that eventually led me to this work I do with the U of O.
Okay.
But it was like functional recovery and strength-based yoga. And that was like what we offered. And we started out super lean and like, it was pretty much me teaching all the classes.
And this is, which location is this?
This was Crescent Village.
Okay, Crescent Village. Okay. So this is your
Yeah.
first location, roughly 13 years ago, I think you said. You're gonna
2011.
take us through the steps. Okay, so it
Yeah.
was mostly you and functional recovery and vinyasa. Strength.
Yeah. Yes. And the cool thing is we very quickly, with this practice packaged in a way that felt comfortable for, dads that went to swim and tennis club and moms who dropped their kids off and then, whatever, went to work, or like for everyone, it was sort of like, oh yeah, like I can do this. It just felt, but the cool thing is we always incorporated mindfulness. Always. We always incorporated breath work, always. And maybe we weren't calling it meditation and pranayama, but that's what it was. And you feel that when you practice it, you feel it and it impacts you. So what ended up happening is our students became very quickly, I would say, like really open to these other components of the practice because it was given to them in like a little bit of a baby step. And I remember that being on my radar. I doubt I was as intentional about it as I would be now, or in hindsight, I can see. But it was definitely like a focus and something that I was thinking about. But the cool thing is it did open people up to like, yeah, maybe we want something that's not so like super intense, but still a flow, still a way to connect with our breath. And like, maybe we can learn a little bit more like about what meditation is. So because our students were beginning to open up about that, I think our offerings were able to get broadened and shifted. And we've always been led by what people are asking for and what they're open to. That's a huge pillar of the way I run the studio and always will be. But it was really exciting to see, like, this is something that these people who maybe were so closed off about yoga, ultimately, now it's a huge part of their life. And I have students still that started back then, that, all those years ago, and it's something that will forever be part of what they do and the way they think, inside of the studio and out. So it's kind of incredible.
So then what happened? Did you outgrow the space at
Yeah.
that time?
So another thing, and I don't know how much of like the nitty gritty people are wanting as far as like business, but the one thing I would say, a piece of advice I would give, and whenever anyone consults with me or asks me about opening a studio or any business for that matter, I started so conservatively and I didn't take out a bunch of debt. I didn't overextend myself. I was really pretty cautious about that. And I worked really hard, like really hard. I was there all the time. And I don't think there's a way around that, whether you're opening a studio or another business. I think when you're starting, you have to put so much sweat equity into it. It just is like, that's the only way it works, because it's also the only way you have an understanding of like the heartbeat of the business and of your clients. So I was there
all the time,
6 a.m. and 8:30 and 9 and noon and 5:30 and 7. And then I slowly, I would say within the first, but it was like, I don't want to have an expensive payroll. Like I had the space and it was pretty small, and I didn't have any retail. It was like just simple, like that's it.
Okay.
And that to me made it feel more comfortable. So to go back to your question,
Oh, like less scary.
Was it scary, or did you feel nervous? Like I felt like I had a confidence in what we were offering. I felt really proud of what we were offering. It always personally resonated with me. And that wasn't like, and continues to be as we evolve. It's like what our students are open to and interested in, and what my personal, like what impacts me, that like leads. So like we just introduced Pilates because I fell in love with Pilates. I was like, I know our students are going to love this.
I didn't know
something that we can add and do differently. And same thing with like our weighted classes. Like, so I think I was really driven by like, no, I know what we're offering is great. And I know I'm willing to work really hard.
Yeah.
I know I want our community to have this, coupled with like, I'm going to be really careful with the way that I'm running the business. And I think that's where I know sometimes studios that like that portion of it is like not thought through all the way. So I kept costs super, super, super low, minimal, very conservative. I didn't take out a bunch of debt, and we built really slow. Like I was not doing a bunch of paid advertising, and it was like pretty much just word of mouth. We didn't have a ton of equipment, even like people brought their own yoga mat, and we had some blocks, I think. And
another thing is like you felt called, and you saw that there was like an actual market. Like we lacked what you were looking for, and you knew there was an appetite for it because you're a living testimony of that in Bend. So, and then you started conservatively, financially anyway, and in the space. Okay, so
and then I would say within like a few months, between 3 and 6 months, I had hired, I think, 2 instructors and then another one. Because I also at the same time, like I said, like we were getting divorced, and I had 2 little kids. So it was like, I honestly, like that year was like a blackout. I'm like, I don't really know how it happened, but we got through it. So definitely what I did as soon as I could was bring in more instructors. I will say, if we're going to have a section of like, what would you do different or what did you do wrong? Because I was teaching all the classes, and because I have like a pretty unique signature style in the way that I teach like both of those formats, when I went to bring on more staff, the people who had become clients and members of the studio were like, no, we want your class. We want you. And I did that. I messed up and like created like a dependency on me being there.
How could you have not done that? Oh, because but that was a very part of your
figured out a way maybe to bring people on a little bit earlier, at least like 1 or 2.
Okay.
And I think it just had become like the studio is synonymous with me. And I think that's important. And I like that.
Yeah.
But it's also like not sustainable. Obviously, I can't teach 7 days a week, every single class. Like that's insane. So it was an interesting like transition, and it was like people were receptive eventually. And it was like trying to find a blend of like having the staff come on and be similar because that's what resonates with them, not because I'm making them or controlling them or giving them sequencing, but also like to let people know that there's so much benefit in diversifying the way that you practice and who teaches you. Like, so there was a little bit of like a bump with that.
Yes.
And it was, people just were like, we just want you to be here all the time. And I'm like, that's not real life. So that pretty quickly, changed. But I will say, like, as a studio owner, I still teach 5 days a week. I'm still there probably 6 days a week. I still answer all the phone calls and respond to all the emails, and I'm the one who's posting on our social media, and I'm in DMs, and it's really important to me to stay really connected. And the teaching component of it is the part I love the most. So it is rare for a studio owner to teach as much as I do, but I love it. So
Yeah.
that, like, out of anything, like, I just recently, after 12 and a half years, started, like, I hired someone to help me kind of with some of the logistical stuff and the just like management admin stuff. But the teaching thing, like, I'll always do that. I mean, same with you. You still teach a ton.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That is the fun part.
It's the
That's
fun
the
part,
fun
right?
part.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know what you mean on in a different sort of atmosphere or setting about like, I don't want people to not come if I get a sub. I can't stand that. And I want, just as a leader of a fitness team, I don't want it to be like there's a star or 2 stars or 3 stars. I want it to be like the analogy of, oops, that's
Ooh.
that's the new Zoom update, people who are listening on audio. I just produced balloons. I don't know how.
It's a
But
party.
it's like, I don't know if you've heard the analogy that we want to be a galaxy and not like a star or two. So it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard when you are a powerful leader and
Right.
passionate, and the owner and the one, so anyway, okay, so you, so then what, so then you move to the other location. So PS, like, little tiny spoiler alert for the listeners, but to tell them where we're going with this.
Yeah.
Kelsey now has, like, I haven't seen the new location, but the most beautiful, stunning yoga space studio, and in like the hub of Eugene, where all the cool, like the Lululemon is, and the Bar 3 and the Orange Theory, and like it's like in the hub, it's like the sweet spot of town.
Yeah.
And then she just opened another location, and so we're getting there. So
Yeah.
the first one was small, you did all the work.
Yes. And to answer your question about whether I could see the whole staircase or just the
Yes.
first step,
Yes.
I could not see the whole staircase.
Okay.
And I definitely could see maybe a few steps ahead. But to me, the first couple years were really about just like doing really good work, showing up and just giving my all, and letting like things kind of start to evolve. I will say one thing that can happen, I think, if you are really strong in your vision of the entire staircase, you can miss opportunities. Like I said, the evolution of like the studios, my business as a whole, like there's no way I could have envisioned what it would be right now 13 years ago.
I was literally going to ask you that.
No
I was literally going to say, did you ever think then that you'd be opening the second amazing location today?
No. And I also am a really big believer in like visualization and intention setting and goal setting. And I credit where we are right now 100% to that. So we can get into get into that practice a little bit if you want, but at the beginning, the initial part of it is my vision was, of course, this is going to work. Of course, it's going to succeed. Of course, I have a future with this studio. But like an actual, like, this is where I want to be in 5 years. This is what it's going to look like in 2 years, even. I did not have that. It was like, it's really important for me to work like this and do things the right way and hire staff carefully and be super hands-on and be really like have my ear to the ground with what students are looking for and asking for. Like those things were always non-negotiables and they were really clear visions. But as far as like the progression, no.
Wow.
No plan. And totally changed and turned out better than I could have imagined, but not what I was thinking. And we did outgrow our first space fast. Like I would say, so we had a 5-year lease. We stayed there for 5 years. I would say within a year and a half, it was like, we need a bigger space.
Okay. So then you go to the other space, which is where I first took a class from you and met you. At the time, you were still calling your business Hardcore Yoga.
Yes.
Okay. And so, and was that another 5-year lease? I feel like it was 3, 5.
It was, yeah.
Okay. And then at what point in there did you realize like, oh, whoops, we've done it again?
Yeah. So basically, and this again is like another, in hindsight, something I maybe could have been a little bit more intentional about or recognized like what the core values of our studio are, which I was really clear about them at the beginning of this podcast. I know them very well now. At that point, like the value wasn't so much the space. It was, we need to be on this side of town. Like
Gotcha.
the location needs to be on this side of town because this is where our core demographic is. There still wasn't anything on this side of town.
Right.
And we need more room. And that was like, I got to find a place that has more space and that, you know, is on this side of town. And I wasn't as intentional about the visual component of the studio with that second location. I was just so desperately in need of a bigger space.
I see. Okay.
That it was sort of like,
It was
it checks the boxes that were like the
right.
necessities.
Yes.
But getting into that space, I was like, it pretty quickly, and we grew a lot in that space. Like
Yeah.
our community progressed and grew, our class offerings grew. We survived the pandemic in that space. Like I'm so proud of the work we did in that space, and our community grew in that space. But
Wait, I have to tell you a story.
yes.
And I think the people that are listening to this podcast that know me actually know this story. And I don't think you know this story. But I decided to create warrior rhythm in that space.
What?
Uh-huh. Oh, I got chills. I can't believe I've never told you the story.
Oh my God.
I talk about this and you, I don't use your name, but when people ask about like the origin story of what I did, and I won't go into it here because they've all heard it a million times, but you haven't heard it. So from your perspective, just so you know, well, I'll set it up a little bit differently. I met Chelsea through this ambassadorship thing with Lululemon. I mean, we officially like met and started doing community stuff together. And I wanted to support her business, and I'd heard about her for all these years. I knew she was amazing and I wanted to go support local business, but I work out all the time and my body's always tired. And I like the last thing I ever want to do is grab another workout. So I'm like, how can I support her business and go to her studio without wrecking my body? Because again, I teach a lot, you know how it is. And I'm like, I'll go to a restorative class of hers. So it was like a Sunday. It was like 4:30. I went to a restorative class. And at this time in my life, Beachbody Live had just closed. So I was like sad, and I lost my role in that company as master trainer and all that stuff I was doing for them. So I was feeling lost. I was feeling sad. You know, this was like a huge, I don't even want to say crossroads in my life. It was just a huge loss. And then I come to take your class really just to support you and support your business. And you said something in your class about like, you know, sometimes you need to take something off of your plate to create space and energy and room for new things. And I was like kicking around the idea of creating my own format. But I'm telling you, when you said that, and I was like, on a yoga mat. I love that like the inception of this was born in a yoga mat.
That's amazing.
But it was in your
How have I never heard that before?
I don't know. I'm sorry. I haven't told you so.
Love it.
It was in that space. And I just was like, my reaction to your thing in my head internally was like, well, I didn't take something off of I was like listening, you know, I was in it. I was like being a good student. And I'm like, I didn't take something off of my plate, but something was taken from me. But that means there's room. And I literally sitting there in your studio, I was thinking about all of the energy, time, travel, passion, talent I'd been giving that role. And I was like, oh my gosh, that means I have all of that talent and energy and time to do my own thing.
I love that.
To go for it.
And that is a message that I just taught that format, that class last night. We still have it on Sunday nights. It's still like packed. People love it. It's such a beautiful place to slow down and recognize like you get to be intentional about where you send your energy, and you have to slow down and take space to be able to know where it is worthy of going. That's amazing.
Isn't that? I cannot believe I never told you that. So I literally think like, had I not taken that class, like, I don't know what I'd be doing with my life.
Oh my gosh.
Also,
wow. That's incredible. Thank you.
About that format, just being the restorative thing. Also, there's something about it that feels like you get to like get out of your body. Not, I mean, like you get like this sort of perspective over your life, and you can kind of see yourself and where you are, and it's there's some clarity and some perspective that happens in there. Anyway, carry on. So that space, it's
That
very
space,
dear to my heart. So you knew you outgrew that
That's
one.
amazing. Yeah, and I would say too, like it was, I mean, we renovated it. We did like a really cool big like gold graffiti wall. Like it had a cool style, but it didn't have the same like very high end feel that the first studio had. And I could feel that. And again, like I think a lot of our students didn't really care. Sorry, my dog is in here.
I don't care. I like it. It makes it for a better podcast.
But I think again, like to me, I am so sensitive with my environment and space, and like it does matter so much the way things feel and look. And that was a cool space, but it didn't have the same feel for me. And I also like being at Oakway was always my dream. That was like the holy grail, like which is where my studio, our main studio is now. It's called Oakway Center. It, like Ellen was saying, is in like kind of the center of Eugene. It's like kind of the premier higher end shopping area. And I started in that space pretty soon after we were there, visualizing and like setting the intention, like this is where I want my studio to be. And we also did outgrow that space pretty quick. Like it was full packed. So we ended up actually right before the pandemic, I had like a lease for actually a different space at Oakway that was like in my hand. My attorney was reviewing it. And then the pandemic hit. And I was like, can we hit pause for 2 weeks? Because it was only going to be 2 weeks. And I'm not sure, like, I just want to wait until we get through these 2 weeks of the pandemic. And then
2 weeks,
and then we'll proceed forward. So it was already in the works in 2020. And it ended up taking, when we moved in September of 2021. So it was like a year and a half pause. But I was super grateful because it actually changed like the trajectory of the studio. We ended up with a different space that was bigger than the space we were in, but not as big as what we were planning to sign on for, because this virtual class component became part of our business model. That, again, that's such an example of like,
the
if
staircase.
I was so set on the staircase,
yes.
I wasn't open to receiving like other opportunities and ideas that weren't part of the original plan. That would have been something that got overlooked and missed. And I don't know where we would have been business wise if we didn't have that virtual component for during the pandemic. But it's still something that's important for our students and our members. And we still offer virtual classes. And that has evolved and progressed a lot over, the last 3 years. But it was a pivot within our business that, again, you have to stay open if you are going to jump into this role of owning a business. I really believe you have to stay open to opportunities and things looking different than what you maybe initially thought. So like being solid in your core values and like your mission, your vision, what's important to you from like the bigger kind of moral standpoint or what you really want to offer, but also knowing that like the way that that's going to get offered into the community is always going to be evolving.
That's cool. Kind of like the practice of yoga itself.
Exactly.
So when did you get into the marketing? Because you mentioned it earlier that when you first started, there wasn't much marketing happening or newsletters or anything like that. And you're someone who I think is excellent at sales and marketing. I think from, your emails, everything, your email marketing, I see your business mind at work with some of the promotions and the timing of your promotions and the way you go about them and your social media marketing and all of that. So you definitely have a knack and an eye for it. But I also think that's part of being artsy and like being good at designing spaces. Like that's all part of the right side of the brain. So when did that become something that you were like
Yeah, that's
selling?
a good question. I think it evolved over time. It's also interesting to have started a business in 2011 when like social media was not a thing. I
Okay.
didn't have an Instagram account, a personal or a business one, when I
Okay.
opened the studio. We had a Facebook page, but like
Wow.
that was it.
Wow.
2011. So,
Wow. Oh, so
I
you
mean,
just evolved with it. You just hopped on
yeah.
that train and rode it. Okay.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it was trial and error. Another thing too is like my communication style has always been really kind of more minimal, just like my design aesthetic is, just like the way I like to, like you were saying, this like remove all the unnecessary so you can really get clear about what matters. I believe in that in the way that I communicate with our clients and the way I live my life in general. So it's always like, okay, what can I take away? Like, what do we really need to communicate? And I think because of that, there's a relationship of trust, and like our clients or students are really listening to what is said because they know that it's of value.
Mm.
I don't over communicate.
Yeah.
I try to be really intentional about like we do like maybe one newsletter a month, and it's usually like very information heavy. It's we're communicating when we really need to.
Then they learn, they do trust. They know that if you're asking for their time, if you have something to say, it's going to be of value to them. It's going to matter.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think with social media too, that has evolved a lot over, and it's funny, I like this is how unprofessional it used to be. I had my own, like my personal Instagram was the studio's also, like that was it. It was just like the same, one and the same. And it was super yoga heavy and very like focused on health and wellness, but that was the only place that we communicated information, I mean, in Facebook.
Yeah.
And then after, I don't know when it was, I think it was after my youngest kid is 5. And I
Mhm.
think when I was like pregnant with her, I was like, I probably shouldn't be like sharing all of these like baby things with like our
I
students.
remember this. I remember this. I remember this. Like
Like, I
I
think we
remember.
should
I
have
remember it. I think it
yeah,
was like probably 5 years ago, and you created it as a
yeah. I
business.
was like, we should probably have a separate one for the studio. And so now my personal one is more family, and I
It's
still post
perfect.
yoga
Yeah,
stuff and food, and, but it's
perfect.
also like, I'm like, right, I don't think like my husband and my like home renovation stuff and like taking
Uh,
pictures a day of my baby should be
well,
on the
I do like
studios.
all that. I personally think people should follow both because
Well,
they're
right. And again,
it's
like I feel like the studio brand and
and you.
myself, like
It's
it's one and the same.
inextricably you and the studio are inextricably interconnected, but
Totally. But like on a professional level, I was like, it's time to separate these. And that was good and kind of gave me a little bit more direction and intentionality about posting. I got a bit more mindful about it, and I try to combine, and even more so once we changed, sorry, this conversation is like all over the place, but we changed. So when we moved to our current location, one of the things I also knew I wanted to do was rebrand the studio.
yes, I want to
Yeah.
go there, please.
Yeah. So
Go
that was
yoga.
after 10 years of
Okay.
being hardcore yoga, which again was like that name was really intentional. And I think there was a lot of value in it because it again was like, oh, this is an appealing place for someone that wouldn't necessarily go to like a woo-woo yoga studio.
Totally. Totally.
But what ended up happening is over the years, like I said, we progressed so much in our offerings.
Yeah.
Like we weren't just doing hardcore yoga. We
Yeah.
weren't a strength-based vinyasa
Yeah.
only core specific studio. We did all of these other things. And I felt like the name started to almost become a limiting factor on the other side of the spectrum in
I
that it was intimidating.
I completely agree. I think it was
Yeah.
it was the right one when you had it. And also the timing of changing it with the new space
Yeah.
was also perfect. It was
Yeah.
just a brilliant move.
Yeah, so I kind of knew, again, I felt like we outgrew the space and we outgrew the name way before we actually moved, but it was like,
The
again, the
right time.
pandemic
It
really
was the
slowed
right
things
time.
down.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when we started at the current space that we're in, which is my dream studio space, like I could not pick a better location. I love the layout. I love the way it looks. I love everything about it. I feel so grateful to be in that space still almost 3 years later. I'm like, I walk in and I'm like, I can't believe I get to have this be where my business is.
Yeah.
But with that, it was like, we have this, and this is something I would recommend if someone is starting a studio from scratch. Like, I was so young and so naive when I began mine. The evolution luckily turned out really well, but this is something that you can do before you start your first studio. Like, really being intentional about the branding and what the name and the space and your mission statement and the way that you present yourself, like, how can you allow those touch points with the community to make people feel what it's going to be to practice at your space? Mm-hmm. And that was something that was really important. And the name, so now our name is Glow Yoga. It really was about like that glow from inside that comes from the mindfulness component, from taking really good care of yourself, from slowing down, from tuning in, like all of those practices that create this like radiance from within. And then there's also that outer glow of like, we still are a sweaty, strength-based physical practice. And I love to be glowing with sweat. Like almost every day I am. Yeah. And I think that that's like those, the play that
duality,
be both, right, the duality of it, exactly, and that like inner outer focus that is,
oh yes, yes,
it just all made so much sense. And I knew after outgrowing and feeling like there was a limitation with the name, I knew that glow wouldn't be something we would outgrow. Like it wouldn't not make sense.
It's timeless.
As we evolve and progress,
like
exactly. It can mean so many different things. It can
it
be
does. It also represents the studio. It literally like glows.
Yeah,
like
right. It's very light and bright like, and airy.
Yes, it's internal. Yeah. It's our character. It's how we feel. It's our transformation. It's our sweaty glow. It's the space itself. It's
so
and it's timeless. It's funny, Chelsea, you don't know this, and I didn't tell you this, but I recorded an episode that is going to air the week before we air yours. Oh. And I am answering the question. So today we're answering the question like, what if you want to open your own studio? Do you have what it takes? What does it take? Should I not do it? And I do an episode that hasn't aired yet, but will air before this one, that talks, and I said some very similar things that just came out of your mouth about get clear on your mission, your core values, and your vision, and the name matters. And I say so many of the same things. It's really cool. Okay.
I love that.
So, okay. So I know, speaking of your 5-year-old Charlotte and your busy life, I do know you have to go soon. And this conversation is all over the place in a really wonderful way. But let's dial it in and rein it in. So is there anything else? Is there anything you want to say to someone who is listening that is like, I think I do want to do this? Do you have any words for them and maybe you want to answer this in a backwards order? Is there anyone that you're like, don't do it? Like, is there a certain personality, like the episode that I don't think it's forever. I don't think everyone should create a fitness format. I think it's a special calling and it's a unique set of skills. And so I don't know, take us there if you don't mind.
Totally. So to answer that question, I agree with you. I don't think it's for everyone to own a studio. I would say you need to really understand the gravity and the commitment from a business perspective of what it takes to get off the ground and to maintain a business, a studio. So it's a ton of work. And like I said, you know this, I still work a lot. Like I still work, I would say more than full time. Mm-hmm. And you don't have days off. You don't really ever go on vacation. You don't ever finish your to-do list at work, ever. And part of that is understanding how to set like healthy boundaries, which I'm not the person to ask what those are because I don't do a great job of them. I'm better at it now, but it's been a progression. But I would say even at the very beginning, minimally the first year, 2 years, maybe even 3 years, you are not going to have a balance of like those boundaries. You are going to have to put in a tremendous amount of work. You're going to have to work on the weekends and at night. You might have to hustle this as a side gig while you still have a full-time job. Like it's a lot. It's a lot of work on the front end to get. And it's funny, I just went through this again, opening the second location. Like I was running the current studio while making all the plans and doing the renovation and figuring out all the marketing and all the everything for the second space. It reminded me of when I opened the first studio, because it was like, it's a ton of stuff. So I think, first of all, like if you're thinking about it, probably your passion for fitness or for yoga or whatever it is that you're wanting to have at your studio is probably already there. That's really important and definitely necessary. But I also think it's important to be aware of the business commitment. And you have to, and you can hire some of this stuff out. Like I have a bookkeeper that helps me with, you know, keeping things organized, and I have a CPA obviously, but like you need to know that you're running a business, and that's as much as your job, if not more than you as a fitness instructor. And you have to be okay with that. And that's like, you can get into the weeds. And also if anyone is local or not local and is interested, is thinking about this, I am happy to have a phone call or chat. I've mentored several people that have opened their own studios in different locations, or people who are thinking the same thing. Like, is this right? Is it not? I think it's really important that you have a niche or some sort of thing that differentiates you from what's being currently offered in your market. I think that's really important. And you have to know that you can provide a service that's not being provided yet. I think that's a huge component of it. And yeah, you got to be willing to work really hard. Yeah. Those are the biggest things that I can think of.
Oh, you were going to circle back to how maybe if that's not the right next step, this like non-brick and mortar thing, and you were going to tell us about the athlete.
So it's interesting. We're doing a 200-hour like yoga teacher training at our studio this spring. And one of the things that I'm not doing most of it, but I am coming in for the like business and ethics weekend and running that module. And one of the things that we're going to be teaching our trainees is like, figure out how you want this practice to fit into your life. Mm-hmm. The cool thing that's happening now that I didn't really feel was an option or was happening so much when I opened the studio, like there wasn't really an in-between of like, you either are an employee, like you teach for someone, or you own a studio. Right. There are so many like corporate wellness contracts now, or things that you can do where you can promote yourself and go into like a business and teach a weekly class there. Or like I teach a class once a week at EPD, Eugene Police Department, which I love and feel so passionate about. So I get to teach like mindfulness and meditation to SWAT team members, detectives, like their support staff. It's so amazing. But that's something that like, I mean, I happened to get connected with them because they knew me from the studio, but that it would be something that you could create some sort of contract with an agency or a business or something that is you running essentially a business, but without all of the overhead, the risk, the expense. Yes. So I really love the idea of like reaching out. You could even like create your own business, and you can speak to this way more than I can, but if you have a specific format or you're a specific type of teacher, you have something really unique to offer, but you don't want to take that big leap and risk of a commitment of signing a lease and all of that. Like maybe you rent out a space. There's tons of different places around town or wherever anyone is. You can rent out a space and then market yourself online, like creating an Instagram or I mean, I think that there's so much space for that, even from the virtual component. Yes. Which again, you can speak to this way more than I can. You know, I think there's so many avenues where you have more agency over the way that you teach. You make more, you know, can be more in control of the way that things work, but without the big commitment of running a studio. Like I have to manage a staff of 17 people now.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
think, there's there's a lot of
There's
like
everything.
it,
Yeah.
again, if you're thinking about it and you're weighing the differences, like you have to be okay with all of the business stuff taking a lot of your time. And I personally have come to love running the business. Like I find so much, it's really fun to like feel like you're dialing in marketing stuff or you're branding stuff or you're, it just like I find that all really gratifying, and it like I totally nerd out on it now, but it's for sure a huge portion of my time, my energy, my effort, my days are spent running the business. And I think there is this beautiful like spectrum now and middle ground of ways that you can do both, do
Mhm.
all, do and maybe it is a smaller scale, but I would
Yeah.
even say like, even if you're not quite sure, you have some hesitation or some like limitation. I mean, you have to have some upfront money to start a studio. Like you have to have, or some investment or a partner or something. But I think there would even be ways to create, like, if you're not quite ready for that, but that's something you want to do in a few years or a couple years, like, I think you could even set up some practices, some events, like you can put yourself out there and build a bit of a following before you make that commitment, uh,
Yes.
in a way that is super low risk and just like gives you, I think, a little bit more flexibility.
Yeah. I think that's smart. I think a
Yeah.
first step being flexing those entrepreneurial muscles without all the overhead and commitment and
Mhm.
all of the things. And or if they're sure that they're ready, I love that you started in a lower risk situation. Like you
Yes.
didn't bite off more than you knew you could handle. And
Yeah. I would
I-
recommend that for
yeah.
sure.
Okay, so a couple more things. What is
Yes.
the nonprofit thing that I heard?
Yes. So this is something I'm so excited about. So we have throughout the years, like Seva is Sanskrit for service. So it is essentially like a cornerstone of the practice of yoga. It's really important. And it's about taking the practice and the principles off of the mat and into the world, into the way that you live. So it's always been something that has resonated with me. We've always done like benefit classes and partnerships and things like that. But it's over the years has been like pretty like just sort of whenever something comes up or we have an opportunity, we'll do something. And I wanted a way to be a little bit more accountable, to have consistent like planning around supporting local nonprofits. So I also feel like, again, as I've grown and progressed, as our community has grown and progressed, like I feel so lucky that we are in the position that we're in, that we have such a solid, business and just like within our personal life and family, like we feel really blessed. And I felt like a really strong calling to make sure that there was like something that doesn't get pushed down the to-do list that isn't a top priority. So I developed this program essentially within the studio. And so we do a quarterly nonprofit feature. So we pick a local nonprofit. And again, a lot of these people or these organizations are things that I've done or connected with or
Right.
donated to in the past over the years. But we'll pick someone and take 3 months to feature them with our community. So we have this big platform. We have thousands of people on our mailing list, and we have, hundreds of students that are coming into the studio every week. So with that, I was like, this is an opportunity to be able to, encourage this like community support on a bigger level than anything that I can provide or just my family can provide
Yeah,
individually.
that's
So basically, every 3 months, we will choose a nonprofit. So, like right now, our Q1 nonprofit is Relief Nursery, but we've done Ronald McDonald House, we've done Connected Lane County, we've done Food for Lane County, we've done Bags of Love. And pretty much it is an opportunity for us to take 3 months to highlight this nonprofit. So we'll repost any of their social media shares.
okay.
We'll write about them in our monthly newsletter. So we let people know and link their site, let our students know how they can get involved from like a volunteer standpoint, a donation standpoint, if they can get on their mailing list. And then we'll do 3. So the first Sunday of every month, we do a benefit class. for that nonprofit. So for 3 months, they're featured. So there's information being exposed over and over again for our students in a deeper way than just like, hey, we have this one benefit class, which is great. But it's like, if you can't make it, it's kind of off your radar and you're like, okay, whatever. This is like over and over again, we're saying like, this is what this nonprofit does. We like to feature, if we can, within the time frame of like something happening. So like if they have their like big annual benefit, or if they have like Ronald McDonald House had a toy drive at the same time, like we did a clothing drive, we're doing a diaper drive right now for Relief Nursery. We featured Food for Lane County over the summer because that's when they have the least amount of volunteer presence and donations, because it's just like people get busy and they're not around and it's not the holidays, so they're not necessarily thinking about a food drive. So it's like trying to be selective as much as we can with that. And then we'll raise money for them 3 times with 3 benefit classes. But I think the bigger impact is
the awareness,
that our community has awareness, and all of these have a different avenue of support for our community. So what we've noticed also is our students, like something will resonate with someone really deeply, and then they'll like commit to volunteering at that nonprofit, or commit to at least being on the mailing list, or like now that's on their radar as a place where they can connect and support that maybe otherwise wouldn't have been. So it's been really awesome. And the structure of it makes it so I'm accountable. Like, so I'm creating these relationships. I'm making a plan for the next quarter. It's, and doing it quarterly makes it feel more sustainable to me than once a month, because I'm going on site typically and meeting with the, director or whoever is willing to work with us. I'm educating myself so I can educate our students. I'm making sure that I understand fully what they're doing, so I can relay that and figure out how we can connect it to our community the best we can. So it is a big commitment, but it's also like doing it once every 3 months makes it more sustainable. So then it's like, okay, we're in this relationship for 3 months, and then, we'll move on to the next one.
And then maybe it can be fairly turnkey. Like if you do Food for Lane County again, or Ronald McDonald again. That's incredible.
It's been awesome. It's been really, really great, and feels so good. And like our community, this practice opens your heart and it makes you more compassionate, and it shifts your perspective. It does. Like every time we come off of our mat, that's happened. We've softened, we've opened, we care more. And so to have a group of people that feel that, and then a way for us to connect them to how that can be an output of energy and support in our community has been like, it's probably the thing I'm most proud of that I've done. So it's awesome.
I'm so glad it came up today. And if you're listening to this episode and you already have a studio, which is part of the audience, then what a great idea
to do. Awesome. It's been wonderful. Highly recommended. It feels so good, and our students love it. Like
it feels good to do good.
Absolutely.
Okay, so as part of that glow,
Yes.
So the podcast is called Confessions of a Group X Instructor. So did you think about this? Do you have a little confession? Come on.
I do. This is really funny. I hope this isn't too inappropriate. I don't think it is, because
I doubt it. I'm pretty appropriate. I'm ready for anything, actually.
Okay, so my confession is, and it's kind of exercise related, but I literally only own 2 pairs of underwear, because I am not an underwear wearing person. Same. Because I'm in leggings all the time. So no underwear for those. And I literally have 2. So if I am wearing jeans 2 days in a row, I can wash one. That's it.
That is amazing. That is such
I have never publicly disclosed that, but I thought it was so funny.
This was the time and place. That was perfect. I don't wear underwear when I work out either, but I do more than 2 pairs.
Well, right. I mean, I should probably have more than 2, but I don't feel the need to get more. It's not
I don't wear them. I just have them. They don't get used. Oh my gosh. Okay, so that was perfect. You You hit the nail on the head right there. All right, so let's tell people where they can find you, follow you, support you. And if you're local, and I'll put this all in the show notes. This will also go in the email that accompanies this episode. But tell us about the 20% off code, the 3 classes, what you're offering, where to find you on social, all those things.
Okay. So you can find us on social. Glow Yoga Eugene is the studio's page or Instagram. Chelsea Duke Yoga is mine if you want more dog and kid pics.
And house renovations.
and house renovations. And then our website is yogaeugene.com. Our full schedule is there. Both of our studio locations are there. And yes, if you are local, we have a 3-class pass. So like a new student intro pass that we're doing a 20% off discount for listeners. So yeah, that code, I can't remember it.
I do. It's Confession 20.
Confession 20. So you can, use that. And then also all of our information is on our website. So if you have questions about the classes, you can let us know. We are doing a 200-hour teacher training this spring, and we are going on our annual Mexico retreat in May.
We do that too.
All of the information is on the site. We kind of have, a lot of stuff going on. And
I forgot you do retreats too. You do it all, like nonprofits and retreats and yoga teacher training.
That's so selfishly motivated. I'm like, where do I want to go for a week in paradise and have healthy food and movement and lots of sun and relaxation time? So I love our retreats. They're so fun.
Incredible. You have a very, very blessed life. And it was so fun to get to know you better today and actually just hang out with you is the best.
This is amazing.
So overdue. Next time we need to hang out, we'll just podcast.
Right. Exactly. I'll come on this podcast
we finally made time for each other. All right. Thank you so much, Chelsea. And thank you everybody for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining in on the Confessions of a Group X Instructor podcast. If you're interested in becoming a warrior instructor, go to warriorinstructors.com. But if you want more and found this episode amazing, please give us a rating. And with a simple click to subscribe, we'll invite you back to our next episode. So remember, be brave, be bold, be blessed. And above all, listen, learn, love.